Good morning, students. Welcome back to online session. In our previous session, we discussed about the concept called creating and running programs. So, how we can create the programs and how we can execute the programs. That thing we discussed in our previous session. So basically we said it is a step-by-step process where we have to follow different steps in order to create a program and in order to compile the program and finally in order to execute the program. So quickly I will go to that point and we'll have a quick overview on that concept and we'll discuss the we will proceed and we'll discuss the further concepts. So creating and running programs. So we said we have to create a program using a text editor. So what is a text editor? That also have given the clarity. And whenever we are writing a program using in one particular language, that needs to be converted in machine language. And in order to convert that program into machine language, we are using some more programs, and it is not a single shot process, isn't it? Converting the high level language program or converting the assembly language program into machine language program, it is not a single step process. It is in turn having many different steps. So uh, we said basically the process of converting a high level language program into machine level language, or the process of creating and running programs, it is a four step process. In the first step, what we are doing, we are writing and editing the program, and this writing and editing, how we are doing, with the help of a text editor we are doing. So different examples for text editors I have given. I said your notepad, your word application, all these are examples for text editors only. So basically what we can do with the text editor, in the sense we can write letters, we can make some notes. Okay, these are all some of the different applications of your text editors. Apart from these applications, your text editor can also be used to narrate the programs or to write the programs. Okay, in that sense we discussed. So then we said compiling the program. For compilation purpose, we are using the compiler. So compiler, in turn, it is having two different programs. One is the preprocessor and the other one is the translator. So the preprocessor, what it will do, it will look for the preprocessor commands inside your program. So what are these preprocessor commands? When we do the stuff practically, there we discuss in detail. So the preprocessor, what it will do, it will look for preprocessor commands inside your program, and it will do the replacement, or it will do the linking of header files into your program. So what are header files? Again, we need to have a discussion on that one. So very soon we'll have the discussion on header files as well. So then after pre-processing, whatever file we got, we call that file as translation unit, and that translation unit, we are giving it to the translator. So the translator, what it will do, it will simply translate line by line code into machine language code, isn't it? Line by line code into machine language code, and it will also add some of the hardware related information to your translation unit. So to form the after translation unit, we are going to have the final module or final code file, isn't it? Final code or final module we are going to have after translation. So after this translation, we have a linking process, and who will do this linking means the linker, isn't it? The linker program will link all the library modules into your program, or it will simply replaces the user defined as well as predefined function calls with their code. What are functions and what are function calls? Again, we need to have a discussion. So simply you remember, your linker will replaces all the function calls, both predefined as well as user defined, with its actual code. Okay, with its body of the code, we can say. So then finally, after this linking process, we are getting the executable module, and that executable module we are taking to the fourth step, that is executing the program. So once the program is ready for execution, I mean, once you have performed all these things, creating the source code, converting into translation unit, converting into final module, and converting into executable module, executable code. So what we have to do, we have to go for executing the program. And in this execution of program, what we do, we take the help of a special operating system command, okay, that is known as a run, and special operating system program known as a loader. So what this loader will do means, whatever executable code we will get after the third step, after the linker, that code will be saved inside the hard drive only. So we need to bring that executable code into the primary memory in order to execute that one, isn't it? Anything you want to execute or anything you want to see in action, it has to be brought into the random access memory. It has to be brought into the primary memory. So who will do the job for you means a special operating system program known as loader. With the help of run command, it will load the program into the primary memory. And once the program is in primary memory, it will take the full control of the processor and it will start its execution, okay. And during the execution process only, it will display the output for you on the output screen, or it will store the output in a output file, okay. So all these things how it will be performed, you can see over here in this particular figure. So initially what the programmer is doing here, the programmer sitting, he is taking the help of the text editor. He's taking the help of the text editor to generate the source code. So by taking the help of the text editor, what he is doing, he's generating the source code. So once, I mean, the text editor, it is something like this. So text editor will have the actual source code in the specified language. Suppose if you are taking the help of C language, then the code will be like this. If you're taking Python, then the code will be different. If you're taking Java programming, then the code will be different. So whatever programming language you're taking, in order to write the source code, that programming language code you have to write inside the text editor. So basically after the text editor, what you will have means, you will have the source code of the program. That source code we are giving to the compiler. That source code we are giving to the compiler, and this compiler internally, it is having two things, isn't it? The preprocessor as well as the translator. So after preprocessor, after translator, we will get the final code, or we also call that code as object code. Object code. So that object code will be in the form of machine language. Even though it is in machine language, it is still not ready for execution because we have to do further processing, isn't it? Because we have to do further processing, we can't say this object code is ready for execution. So whatever object code, whatever we are having, it will be in machine language, and that object code we are giving it to the linker. So this linker is responsible for doing the replacement of your function calls. All the function calls, user defined, period defined, all they will be replaced with the actual code of those functions with the help of library modules. So where that function code will be available means inside the library modules, inside the library files. So by taking the help of these library files, your linker will replaces all that predefined and user defined function calls with their code, okay, or with their bodies, we can say. So once the replacement is done, once the linking process is over, we are getting the executable code. We are getting the executable code, and this executable code, it will be in machine language and it is ready for execution. As you can see, high level programming language, it is in English like statements, isn't it? We are having English like statements, but when we are talking about object module as well as the executable module, you can see the code, it is in zero. We are having only zeros and ones only, because both object code as well as executable code, they will be in machine language. They will be in machine language. So now executable code, it is in machine language and it is ready for execution. So what we have to do, this object code, this machine code, this executable code, this source code, where we are storing all these things means on your secondary storage only. We are saving these things permanently on your secondary storage, on non-volatile memory devices. So once you want to execute this executable code, what you have to do, you have to bring this code into the main memory. To see the result, you have to bring this code into the main memory, and who will do the job for you means the loader or the runner will do the job for you. Okay, once the program brought into the main memory, it will start its execution and it will show the result for you, the output for you. The result is nothing but your output. It will show the output or result for you. Okay, once this entire process is completed, once this complete process is completed, what we do, will stop the execution, and that once the program stops its execution, it will be removed from the main memory. It will be removed from the main memory. And all these process, step by step process, you have to understand, you have to remember, because sometimes they are asking this question for LAQ, that is 10 marks or 7 marks. Hope you understood this concept and you will follow the concept till your externals. So yeah, in today's class we'll be discussing the next concept, that is computing environments. It is a complete theory concept once again. So you have to pay the attention and you have to follow the concept. So computing environments. So computing environments are nothing but, so the way you will interact with the computer. I mean, how you are interacting and what sort of internal devices your computer is having. All based on all these things, they have categorized the environments, the computing environments, and that concept we are going to discuss here. So the way we interact with the computer and what internal components the computer is having, based on this the the computing environments have been subdivided or have been categorized, we can say. So yeah, to start this concept we have to go to the early days of computers. So as you people will be aware of the stuff, in early days of computing there will be only one computer, and that single computer is very much large or enormous size, we can say, which will occupy an entire room, isn't it? As you can see here, some people are working on the early computers. As you can see here, this entire thing is a computer, and here also this entire thing is a computer. See the amount, I mean, see the size of these computers, they are very big. And whatever computing environment we are having over here, we don't have any shared resources, isn't it? We cannot share the resources, and whatever this computer is going to have, the devices internal to it, we have to use only those devices. Okay, so in the early, yeah, we call such a devices, okay, we call such computers as mainframe computers. Okay, we call them as mainframe computers, and whatever computing environment we will get with the help of these computers, we call that computing environment as mainframe computing environment. Mainframe computing environment. And this type of computing environment was there in the early days of computers, in the early days of computers. And what electronic components they used means they use vacuum tubes, isn't it? Vacuum tubes, we are aware of these vacuum tubes. Without any what we call um, medium, or without any material, they created a tube, and in that tube only they are going to store the data. That tube acted like transistors or storage devices at that time. Okay, it is entirely a different concept, and it is not of our concern. So we'll just will have the idea and we'll move forward. So in the early days of computers, the computer's size was very big, and there was no interconnectivity between the computers, and because of that reason, there was no sharing of devices between the computers. Okay, and such a type of computing environment we call it as mainframe computing environment. Okay, mainframe computing environment. And whatever task you want to accomplish with the help of these mainframe computers, you have to give the task to only one computer, and you're expecting the task to be done only by that computer itself. Okay, as there was no sharing of resources. You have to remember this one. No sharing of resources from other computers or from one computer to other computer. Okay, such an environment we are calling it as mainframe computing environment. And they thought that whatever limitations they are having, suppose if you want to connect a computer, sorry, if you want to connect a printer, so and you have two computers and you have only one printer, can we utilize that printer between the two computers? Means no. With mainframe computing environment it is not possible, because we said there will not be any interconnectivity between the computers. So if there is no interconnectivity, it is very difficult to share the resources. And if you have only one printer, means you have to connect that printer to any one of these two computers, and you have and only that computer can utilize the printer, and other computer it has to act like a without any printer thing, isn't it? So uh, at that point the computer programmers or the computer scientists, they thought that whatever environment they are having, it is not sufficient, and they have to go for some more flexible or more feasible solution where sharing of resources should be an option. Okay, so with this idea in their minds, some revolutionary thing happened in programming, I mean in computer world. So that is in the year 1971, we can say. In the year 1971, uh, uh, what we call an employee of Intel organization. As you people will be aware, Intel is one of the large scale producing organization of micro processors, isn't it? Those are nothing but your heart and brain of the computers, isn't it? So in the year 1971, Martian E. Hoff, the scientist name or the employee name is Martian E. Hoff. What he has done is he integrated. I mean, previously the size of the processor or the size of the computer just now we have seen it is something like occupying an entire room. So now what Martian E. Hoff has done means he integrated all the essential components which are required for a central processor or which are required for a processor. He integrated all those components on a single chip, and he called that chip as a microprocessor. So for your understanding, we can remember this point like this. So in the year 1971, Martian E. Hoff, working for Intel, has combined all the microprocessor components, all the central processor components onto a single chip, and he called it as a microprocessor. So basically what he has done means he invented a microprocessor. So with the invention of this microprocessor, because right now the computer size got shrinked, we got a computer on a table, we can say. We got a computer with the invention of this microprocessor, we got a computer on a table. So now instead of occupying an entire room, your computer is on the table now. Okay, so with the invention of this microprocessors, the concept of mini computers, personal computers, and many other computing environments came into existence. Okay, so because we don't have any single chip processor prior to this invention or prior to this revolution, as we don't have any single chip microprocessor, it is not possible for the sharing of resources, and it was not possible of sharing of given task. So now with the advent of these things, with the advancement of these microprocessors, we can think of sharing of resources, and we can think of sharing of task or sharing of job between the computers. So this has revolutionized, or this has paved the ways for different computing environments. Those are nothing but your personal computing environments, your time sharing environments, your client server environments, and your distributed computing environment. So now we have four different types of computing environments. The first one, personal computing environment, then time sharing environment, then client server environment, and finally the distributed computing environment. So we have to understand these four different types of computing environments in today's class. Okay, so let us quickly go and see. So the personal computing environment, as we said, the invention has been done of the microprocessor in the year 1971 by a scientist or by a researcher. His name was Marcian E. Hoff. So he integrated all the necessary components on a single chip and he called that chip as a microprocessor. So with the microprocessor, now we can think of sharing of resources, sharing of job, sharing of computing environment. So as we have different scopes now, so these different scopes has given different computing environment for a user, different computing environments for a user. And in that, the personal computing environment is one such. So what exactly this personal computing environment, what we are going to have inside this personal computing environment, in the sense, so this was the first computer on a single chip and they named it. So we said microprocessor has been invented by Marcian E. Hoff in the year 1971. So he called that microprocessor with name Intel 4004, and this was the first microprocessor, or we can say the first central processing unit on a single chip. Okay, so what exactly we are going to have in a personal computing environment, in the sense we are going to have all the necessary things whatever we need inside a single computer. Like we need a storage device that we are going to have inside personal computing. We need a printer that also we are going to have. We need a display unit, output device that also we are going to have. We need a keyboard, we need a mouse. All these things we are going to have inside a single computer. So all the necessary computer hardware components, they are connected to a single microprocessor. They are connected to a single computer. Your computer is nothing but your microprocessor. So all these devices now, they are going to work collectively in order to solve the user needs, in order to solve the user tasks. Hopefully you understood. So this computing environment will have whole computer of its own, isn't it? It will not depend. Again, here also sharing of resources is not possible. Just the size got shrinked from the entire room to a single table, we can say. Okay, so in personal computing environment also, we have to give whatever desired task we have to give the task to a single computer, and only the single computer is responsible for satisfying your job. Okay, so the user can perform whichever operation he want on the personal computer. And how it will look means like this. So here you can see a typical personal computer is shown in the following figure. So here we have the monitor, we have the DVD, we have keyboard, we have mouse, we have CD-ROM, we have hard disk drive internal to the computer, and your RAM, your processor, all the things we are having at one place. So whatever operation we want to perform, or whatever instructions we want to give to the computer, the whole thing we have to give to this computer only, and only this computer is responsible to accomplish your job, to accomplish your task. Hopefully you understood this one. So this is personal computing environment, because everything I'm going to have, every single device inside this computer, I'm going to have a personal to me. I'm going to have personal to me. So your laptop, you can consider it as a personal computing environment. Your desktop computer, you can consider it as a personal computing environment. So everything, every single device or every single component, whatever you are expecting inside a computer, all those things you are going to have personal to you. Okay, and no sharing of resources is possible inside this personal computing environment as well. You have to remember this one. And the second type of computing environment, that is time sharing environment. Why we have given the name time sharing? Yeah, it is if you understand this one, you are understanding this environment. Okay, so here, yeah, if you see the diagram, so here we have only one central computer. As you can see this one, we have only one central computer, and your storage devices are connected to that central computer, and these printers, they are also connected to this central computer. And yeah, here whatever devices we have connected to this central computer, all these devices are going to be shared between all these terminals. Basically, we call them as terminals because these are dumb devices. These are dumb devices. They are not going to have their OS. They are not going to have anything of their own. Simply to store something, they have to depend on this central storage. To print something, again they are dependent on these central printers. To do some processing, again they are dependent on the central processor. So likewise, they are just the dumb devices. They are just the dumb devices. They are not going to do anything by their own. So here a user sitting, here a user sitting, here a user sitting, and assume that five of these terminals. We should not call them as computers, but we have to call them as terminals, because all these terminals, in order to accomplish any of the job, like storage job, printing job, processing job, it they are dependent on the central computer. They are dependent on the central computer. In short, they can't do anything by their own, as they are not going to have anything of their own. There is nothing personal now. Everything is shared. Everything is shared. So suppose this first computer, let us assume this is first computer, this is second computer, likewise this is third computer, and this is fourth, this is fifth. So let us assume, and why we are calling time sharing, that I am explaining now. Let us assume computer 1 is accomplishing. Computer 1 has given some job to this central computer. Okay, computer 1 has given some job to the central computer, or we can say computer 1 is printing something on this printer. We'll call, okay, we'll take the example of this particular printer. Okay, this particular printer. So now this shared printer, as it is shared by all these things, all these terminals, and computer 1, terminal 1 is printing something on this printer. Terminal 1 is printing something on this printer. At the same time, terminal 2 also wants to print something on the same central printer. Is it possible? Terminal 2 also wants to print something on this shared printer. Is it possible? Can he print that thing on this computer? No, because already the printer is used. I mean, the terminal 1 is using that printer. So at that same time, terminal 2, even if he wants, he can't use that printer. So what the terminal 2 has to do? Terminal 2 has to wait until and unless terminal 1 completes its job and leave this printer vacant. And leave this printer vacant so that the terminal 2 can print. Okay, in that same manner, all these computers, if any one of the terminal is using this printer, and others, if they want to use the same terminal, what they have to do, they simply have to wait until and unless the terminal who is insisting first completes its job and make the printer vacant. So how this printer is utilized between these terminals, depending on the time only, isn't it? So let us assume if terminal 1 is taking 5 minutes on the terminal on this printer, and if terminal 2 is taking 10 minutes, okay, on this central computer, and if terminal 3 is taking again like 15 minutes, okay, and at that time terminal 4 is insisting, terminal 4 wants to use this printer. So all these terminals, they wait in a queue. All these terminals like 1, 2, 3, they wait in a queue, and then we have 4. They wait in a queue. Like this, they wait in a queue. So 2 has to wait for 1 to complete its job. Okay, 2 has to wait for one to complete its job. And when one will complete its job? After 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, one will complete its job. So now, what is 2's waiting time? So 1's waiting time is complete 0, because when 1 started its job, the printer was vacant. So immediately it has started and it has executed its job of 5 minutes, isn't it? It has executed its job of 5 minutes. But for 2, to complete its job, what it has to do? It has to wait for 5 minutes before starting its job. And what is the length of its job? It is 10 minutes. It is 10 minutes. So now 2 has to wait 5 minutes to complete its 10 minutes job, isn't it? So assume that 3 also came at that same fraction of second. So then what will be the 3's waiting time? 3's waiting time is 15 minutes, isn't it? 3's waiting time is 15 minutes, because it has to wait until and unless 1 completes its job and 2 completes its job. And one terminal will complete after 5 minutes and 2 complete its job after another 10 minutes. So 5 plus 10, 15 minutes 3 has to wait. And what is 3's job length? That is 15 minutes, isn't it? 3's job length is 15 minutes. So likewise, your fourth terminal, it has to wait how much time? Because we have not given any specific timing for this fourth. Let us assume like 5 more minutes. Okay, so now 4 has to wait how much time? 15 plus 15, 30 minutes he has to wait before starting its job. So the length of this fourth job is 5 minutes. So likewise, they are sharing the central printer time. And in the same way, if they want to utilize the central computer, they have to share the central computer CPU time as well in order to accomplish their jobs. Whoever comes first in this time sharing computing environment will be served first. Whoever comes first into this time sharing environment will be served first. Okay, will be served first. Hope you understood this concept. So time sharing, why we are saying time sharing computing environment means because they all are sharing the computer resources based on the time only. Okay, so in time sharing environment, many users are connected to one or more mini computers or central mainframes. They use terminals which are non-programmable computers, or simply they are dumb devices. Okay, in the time sharing environment, the output devices such as printers and auxiliary storage, so whatever internal components or internal devices we are having in time sharing environment, all those things will be shared among the terminals. And they utilize these devices based on time, isn't it? Based on time. Just now I have given the example and I have explained the concept thoroughly. Okay, so the examples for this one is computer labs we can consider. In computer labs, we are going to have only 1 or 2 central computers, and all other computers we are going to maintain them as dumb devices. And these dumb devices, they utilize the resources of central computers. Hopefully you understood. Okay, so the whatever central device we have, the responsibility of that central computer or the responsibility of the central processing unit is it must control all the shared devices, all the shared printers, shared data, and it do the computing for all the terminals. Okay, these are some of the responsibilities of the central computer. Okay, if let us assume if the terminal count increases in time sharing environment, if terminal count increases, what will happen? The response time will delayed, isn't it? The response time will also increases and your central computer will become always busy. Okay, so generally what will happen? The users will get frustrated. So here, as you can see, for terminal 4 has given its job. Terminal 4 has given its job of 5 minutes, and he has to wait for 30 minutes in order to complete its job. Is it a feasible solution? No, it is not at all. Giving a job to the computer and waiting for 30 minutes to complete the job, it is not a feasible solution, isn't it? Nowadays, nobody will accept that kind of computing environment. So that is the reason this computing environment is not having that much popularity. So definitely there is a need to go for further computing environment. We have to look for further solutions, and that one such solution is the client server environment. It is exactly same like your client, your time sharing environment, but instead of having central resources, here the clients, they are not dumb devices. They are not dumb devices. So these clients, they're also going to have their own CPUs, their own storage areas, and their own printers. Okay, these are, we can say, these are personal computers. These are personal computers. So what are all the personal computers are going to have? All those things, these clients, we call them as clients. In client server environment, we call them as clients, and whatever central computer we are going to have here, we call it as a server. Client server. Here clients are not dumb devices like your uh, terminals. They are not dumb devices. They are going to have their own CPUs, their own storage areas, their own printing devices, everything they are going to have. So if they are going to have all these things, we can call them as PCs, isn't it? All these clients are PCs. All these clients are personal computers. They are going to have everything of their own. Apart from that, if they have really big job to do, if they have really big job to do, at that point they also dependent on the central computer to accomplish its job. So that is the only difference between the time sharing and the client server. Time sharing environment, the response time was very slow, but over here, as these PCs, they are going to have their own resources. Whatever small jobs they have, they will accomplish with the help of their local processor, with the help of their local printer, with the help of their local central storage devices. But if they have really big job to accomplish, if they have something, a bigger document to print, then what they will do, they will utilize this central printers. If they have some very big file to store, then they use this central storage. And if they have really big processing to be done, then they use this central computer. Likewise, here the work will be distributed between, the work will be shared between the client and the server. Okay, whenever the client feels flexible to perform the job locally, it will make use of the personal computer only. Or if the job is really big and the personal computer or the client will feel that the job has to be given to the server so that it will fulfill that for the client, then it will send that job to the server and it will accomplish the job at the server, and only the result it will be displayed on the client. So like this, you have the client server environment. So in this type of environment, the computing, whatever computing you want to do, or whatever operation, whatever job, whatever task you want to accomplish, that will be split between the client as well as the server, between the central computer as well as the user's computer, we can say. So the users basically use personal computer. Just now we said, as the users are having everything of their own, we call them as personal computers or workstations. Sometimes we also call them as workstations, so that some of the computing responsibility can be moved to the personal computer. So whatever job we are getting now, in order to what we call, in order to decrease the response time, we are sharing the job between the client as well as the server, so that both will do collectively. Both will accomplish that job collectively, so as to decrease the response time. So only the personal computer is doing the job means it will take more time, isn't it? Or if the personal computer will subdivide the job and give some portion of the job to the central computer and some portion of the job it is doing by its own, then what will happen? Ultimately, the response time will decrease. Response time, in what is response time? You have given the job to the computer and it is giving the output. So how much time it is taking before giving the output, after taking the input, that we call it as a response time. So to decrease the response time, what we are doing, we are sharing the work between central computer and the client. Hopefully you understood. So in the client server, so whatever user computer we are having, we are calling it as a client, and whatever central computer we are having, we are calling it as a server. So in client server computing environment, the users microcomputers are known as the clients and the central computer is known as the server. Just now I have given, I explained that one. So the server may be a powerful computer, and mini computer is a sorry, and the client is a not that much powerful, we can say, or it is a mainframe, or it is a personal computer. Hopefully you understood. So the server, it is a powerful, so it is capable of performing some big jobs. So that is the reason why whenever the PC or whenever the client feels that the job is very big for it, so it will simply divide the job and give the major portion of the job to the central computer, and it will do the smaller portion, and finally they both will work in order to decrease the response time. So this is a client server computing environment. Then we have the distributed computing environment. So it is also similar to your client server computing environment, but here we have more number of servers. More number of servers. So the following figure, it shows the distributed computing environment. Again, here also these clients in this distributed computing environment, these clients are nothing but your personal computers, PCs. So, and these are your servers, and more number of servers will get involved in distributed computing environment. Here, as you can see here, one computing and one central computer, and this is another central computer. They are the powerful computers, we can say. They are the powerful computers, and as you people will know, the Facebook, the Google, or the Amazon, all these big organizations, IT organizations, what they will do means they will maintain their servers at different locations, geographical locations. So they will have a Indian server, they will have a US server, they will have a Japanese server. Likewise, they have different servers all over the world. So when we are hitting some request on our web browser, so if the user's request can be solved by a local server, it will not go beyond, and it will satisfied, the request will get satisfied by the local computer or the local server itself, local Google server itself. But if the current request, whatever the client is requesting, if the current request is not there in the local server, then what will happen? Ultimately it will go to the global server, and it will look for that web page, and it will retrieve that web page from there, isn't it? So I will give you a best example. So let us assume that after your BE, you are going for masters. Okay, after your bachelor of engineering, you are going for masters. So if you want to do masters, you have two options. One is uh, in the local universities you can complete your master's degree. Local universities in the sense, um, within India, or you can do the masters in a global level or international level, like you can go to Australia, or you can go to UK, you can go to US. There also we have different universities, and if you got a seat in any one of such universities, means you can go there and you can complete your masters. So before going there, before going to there, what you will do, you will apply for the master's seat, isn't it? You will apply for the seat, isn't it? So let us assume if you are applying in Indian university. So do you have to visit the UK server in order to do so? No. We are not going to the UK server, we are not going to the US server, you are not going to the Australian server. Simply what we are doing, we are going to the local server where our local university websites are stored, isn't it? So we are visiting that local server, and we are downloading that website into our computer, we are opening that website into our computer, and we are applying for that master's seat. But in case of foreign universities, in case of international universities, is it possible? No. Those foreign universities data will be maintained in uh, that what we call, in that foreign servers only, isn't it? Suppose if you want to apply for a UK university, definitely you have to visit the UK server, isn't it? Even though you are hitting the what we call request on the local computer, it will first go to the local server, it will cease over there. As the website is not there in the local server, immediately what it will do, it will go to the global server. That is nothing but it will go to the UK server, and it will fetch the website from that UK server to your computer. Hope you understood this concept. So in this way, all these servers, they are working collectively in order to fulfill the requests of these PCs. So from where I am requesting the website, from the PC only I am requesting the website. And if the website is locally available, so assume this as the local computer and this as the global computer. And if the website is available locally, the request will not go to the global computer, it will global server, it will directly come from the local server itself. And if the request is if the website is not available in the local server, definitely the request will go to the global server, and it will look for the website and it will fetch that website for you. So likewise, the distributed computing environment will work. Hopefully you understood these four different types of computing environments. The first one is the personal computing environment, then we have the time sharing computing environment, then we have the client server computing environment, and finally the distributed computing environment.